So I just want to have a quick check-in on who John Healey is, our new Chancellor. So it wasn't Mahmoud or Miliband, as many people had suggested. So who is he? Well, he's politically safe. He's a steady hand. He's the ex-defense minister, who I'm sure many will remember for resigning under the Starmer government for not being allocated enough capital to do what he needed as defense minister. Born in Wakefield, a very soft-spoken gentleman. He's 66, married for 33 years. I couldn't find much on his views on the economy, but I saw a lot of reports saying, oh, he's unknown, but actually he was the PPS to Chancellor Gordon Brown, his private secretary, from 1999 to 2001, then economic secretary to the Treasury, 2002 to 5, then financial secretary to the Treasury, 2005 to 7. So he's not a nothing burger here. So he's involved in fiscal policy, regulation, economic planning under both Blair and Brown. Is a defense hawk? Will he be a fiscal one? What's going to happen with gilt? What will his first moves be? I don't know where we start that. Maybe, Mads, you can set a bit more of a scene, and then we can get into some of the good stuff.
Well, I think the problem the government is inheriting, and is a big problem, is we are all relatively poor. We're all £10,000 a year poorer than we would have been if the economy had continued to grow the way it did from the late 70s to 2008. Because if we continue to grow on that trend, GDP per head would be 10K higher than it is today. And that's massive. You think about £10,000 for the average family. It's huge. And that's genuinely agreed, across the board, right? That's both the TUC and economists on the right. So everybody's looking at this issue, and that impacts living standard, impacts tax take, it impacts everything. If you compare the UK to the US, you've got Mississippi, one of the poorest, least functioning states of the US, and our output per head is just above Mississippi. And if you take out London, it's below. So the UK is now poorer than the worst performing American state. Make of that what you will. The typical Poland is going to match UK GDP per head within a decade on current trend. That's really not good. And you look at some of the implications, you look at what it's done to debt. I think, Lomax, you've been digging in a little bit into that. It's a debt interest today is 110 billion pounds. It's the third biggest budget line. It's more than all of education we spent just servicing debt. Welfare is killing us. 330 billion last year, up above 400 billion by 2031. And the issue is that today, welfare, the spend we have on welfare, exceed the entire income tax take.
It's mental. It's absolutely nuts.
It is mental, right? And so it is clear that this is unsustainable. And what I fear is that the government will put their head in the sand and say, well, we can't possibly take money from everybody. They're poor, they're weak, we have to support them. But the challenge we have is unless we make some changes, we will all become a whole lot poorer. And the current trajectory is just not good. Now, how big is the hole we have to plug? Well, sometimes people talk about the 34 billion pound current deficit that happens every year. That doesn't sound like a too frightening number given the size of our GDP. But there's also an 82 billion pound investment line. And it is sometimes said that you can exclude investments because they'll go towards funding stuff that'll be good and yield good things in the future. But the challenge is some of the stuff you count as investments are things like HS2 that will never yield a positive NPV on the current track. There's a ton of stuff we're stuffing in there. We're buying new stuff for the armed forces. We call that investment. Guys, it's expenditure. Right? It is important. We should do it, but it's not going to yield a positive ROI. It is not what you would classify as an investment for any right-thinking investor.
GDP is currently what? So debt to GDP is currently 95%. By, I think, 2060, it's forecast to be 300% at the current rate of deficit and investments that you just alluded to, Mads. That is crazy.
It is, they're crazy numbers. Let's unpack some of the ways we're thinking about investment and why we are where we are. If you look at HS2, because this is sort of this NPV, I used NPV, net present value. If any of your listeners are not sort of, investors, investment professionals, when you make an investment, you have to put some money up front. Let's say we invest $100 million in something. And then you're going to get some money back over time from the revenue, the profit you're going to get from that asset. And what you try and work out is, of course, if I'm investing 100 million today and I'm going to get 100 million back in 10 years, well, today's money is worth more than the money will be in 10 years. So that's a bad investment. And what I'm trying to work out is the money that I'm getting in the future, if I discount that, if I value that at today's value, is that going to be worth more than the investment I'm making? And if an investment is worth more than what I'm putting in, then it's a good investment. So if I'm investing 100 million today, but the thing is worth 110 million in today's money, that's a good thing, and we should do it. We should just keep doing those sorts of things. Now, the challenge we have is HS2 today, it looks like it could exceed 600 million pounds per mile of track.
Is that saving the newts? What is that?
It is the newts, it's the bats, it's the fish. I mean, it's all that stuff. So people are saying it's just because we wanted to make it really fast and people are getting too ambitious. Guys, come on. In Spain, they built a track that was slightly slower, not at 600 million per mile, but at 25 million per mile. Okay, France managed 46 million per mile. Japan, 50 million per mile. And that is even with half of the new expansion they did is tunneled. Okay. So lots of expensive. We have no mountains in the UK. We don't have that excuse. Like you run out of excuses. And why is this happening? It's because of all the rules, all the regulations, all the things we are putting in place to make it difficult to do stuff. Where does it come from? It's this notion of the risk-free society we've been trying to create over the last 30 years. Brick by brick, we have been putting in place barriers to business and to entrepreneurship. And it's all for reasonable reasons. Now, in 1991, Robert Maxwell, he died at sea. And it was found that 450 million pounds were missing from the Mirror pension scheme. So in effect, he had been robbing his pension members. That was a bad thing. So of course we acted. We put in place the Pension Act, minimum funding, FRS 17. Lots of things were done to then protect pension savers, including developing new ways to look at how much money should go into pensions and how they should be valued. One of the key things there is if I'm running a pension fund and I'm investing, I have to value that as if it was invested in gilts. Even if I buy tech stocks, even if I invest in venture capital, I still have to project the value of that in the future as if it was invested in gilts. So lo and behold, everybody invests in gilts. People don't invest in equities and venture capital and the stuff that could actually yield good returns. That's really bad for us. That's why pension funds used to have more than 50% in equities in the UK, and now it's 4%, right? You've got Grenfell. 2017, it was terrible. 72 people died. So of course we acted. We put in place the Safety Act, the gateway approvals, the second staircases. Now the bill has arrived now. In 2015 in London, 33 new homes were built. Last year, 5,000. Okay? An 84% collapse because we made it so difficult, almost impossible to build that nothing gets done. Another example, 2008, the banks nearly took down the economy. So of course we acted. Core equity was increased from 2% to 7%. Retail was ring-fenced. The bill has come back. SME lending to small and medium businesses has decreased from 10% of GDP to 6 to 7%. All right, so less money for the young growth companies, the small companies that need to create jobs and grow. And on and on and on. Brick by brick, we have been building this risk-free society. This is what's killing growth. And unless we reverse it, we can't fix these issues we have around debt and our public finances.
You are on one, my man. I'm seeing you in my mind's eye in public office, standing next to Andy, giving it like it needs to be given. Good. Lovely points.